Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate the Marguerite stitch, which is also known as the star stitch or the 5-point star stitch. Here I have a small swatch of Marguerite stitch, and that is worked in both directions. You can see it's the same on the front and the back. A lot of times when you see this pattern, it'll be worked with a row of single crochet in between so that all the marguerites or stars are in the same direction, or you can work it back and forth in rows like this. Let me show you how it's done. This pattern is worked with a starting chain that is a multiple of 2 plus 1. And if the marguerites are the first row you're making, you'll need an additional 3 for the starting chain. So let's start with a small swatch. We'll start with, we'll say 12 to chain. That is a multiple of 2 plus 1, which is 9, plus 3 for the starting chain, which is 12. Okay, now a lot of times, if you've watched my other videos, you know I like to work into the back hump of the chain rather than in the top 2 V's, and I always say that it's optional. And of course it's optional here also, but I think you'll get much better results in this case if you do work into that back hump, and I think you'll see why here. To start the first marguerite, we're going to go into the second chain from the hook and pull up a loop. Then we're going to continue. Go into the third chain from the hook, pull up a loop, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth. At this point we have 6 loops on the hook. What I'm going to do at this point is pull those last couple loops a little bit taller. So you can see those last couple loops on the hook are a little bit taller than the others. And I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 6 loops. Then I'll chain 1 to close it off, and that's our first marguerite, or our first star stitch. Now to make the next one of the row, what you're going to do is you're going to insert the hook into that loop, or that space from that chain 1 you just made, right there, and pull up a loop. Then for the next one, you're going to treat this last spike that you made as if it were a stitch and go under both loops. If you turn it this way, you can see it kind of looks like the top of a regular stitch. You've got your V there. You're going to go under those 2 loops with your hook. There's the first one, and there's the second one, and pull up a loop. That's our second loop. For the third loop, you're going to go into the same chain as that last spike of the previous marguerite. So into that same chain, and pull up our third loop, which is actually the 4th loop on the hook. Then we work into the next 2 chains, pulling up loops each time. 1 and 2. We've got our 6 loops on the hook. We pull those last 2 up a little bit taller, yarn over, and pull through, and chain 1. And there's our second star stitch, our second marguerite. So it continues like this after that. You go into that space from the chain 1, you go into the side of the last spike of the previous star stitch, going under both loops there at the end. That second one can be hard to find sometimes, but just have to kind of push in there. Into the same chain that the last stitch finished in, and then into the next 2 chains. 1, 2, pull up those last 2 a couple higher, just tug down on the starting chain there to make that happen. Yarn over and pull through all 6 and chain 1. And that's 3 marguerites. Let's make one more for this row. We're going to go into the back of that chain 1 there, the bottom of it you could say. Go into the side of that last spike of the previous stitch, and that's one of the reasons we pull it up so high, is that it's easier to get in there. If that was real tight, getting to the side of that stitch would be much more difficult. And then in this case it's going to be the last 2 chains. Oops. There we go. It's not as important to pull this one up high, but you want to do so just to keep the look of the stitches. Pull through all 6 and chain 1. Okay, so we've got our first row finished with 4 marguerites. If we wanted all our star stitches to face in the same direction, I would need to work another row of stitches coming back the other way, like single crochets would hide it well, or double crochets, whatever the pattern calls for. But let's say we're going to keep working marguerites. Now normally what you would do is turn and go ahead and start chaining. Let me show you what happens when I do that, when I chain 3. Basically, I've got a real twisted chain here, and that's not normally an issue, but because we're going to be working into this chain, we want it all to be facing the same direction, and ideally we want to be working into that back hump. So let me show you a little trick that I like to use when I'm making marguerites. I'll pull those 3 chains back out. This is where I finished the first row. Now instead of turning or chaining, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my left hand, or if you're left-handed, you're right, to very carefully hold that last stitch in place, remove the hook, and put it in from the other direction. Now I'm going to turn the whole piece, and from here I will pull the working yarn to the back here to the left and make the chain 3. 1, 2, 3. By doing this, there's a little less twist on here, and it's a little more natural to work into that back hump. One of the other reasons we do this is because if we don't do this and we work into the top V for these stitches, the edge with those back humps sticking out tends to look loopy and a little bit messy. By working into the back edge, we get a nicer side edge to the piece. By working into the back loop, I should say. So, one of the things you want to do, I'm going to do this one more time, just to really show you, is after you've gotten to the end here, you pull out your loop and you turn with your hook in the other direction. You want to make sure that these chain 3s are kind of loose, a little bit looser than you might normally chain, because you are going to end up working into that top one, even though we haven't right now. You'll see that again at the end, and then in the next 2, of course, to make the next marguerite. So let's go ahead and start the second row. I'm going to insert my hook under the back loop of the second stitch from the hook, the third stitch, then into that first stitch right there, which was the chain 1 we did at the end of the previous row, and then under the next 2 stitches. 1, 2. That gives us our 6 loops on the hook. So I will yarn over, pull through, and chain 1. And I missed a little bit of that yarn, but you can see this gives a relatively straight edge because we have those V's on the outside. It's a little bit neater than if we'd had just the back loop sticking out from the side. Often when you work the Marguerite stitch, you're going to end up working a border anyway, but this just gives it a cleaner look to begin with. So let's start the second stitch. This is just like before. We go into the first, that chain 1 there, we go into there, we go into the side of the last spike, we go into this ditch that the last spike came out of, and then the next 2 stitches. 1, 2. We've got our 6 loops on the hook, pull up the last couple, yarn over, pull through all 6, and chain 1. Let's make the next 2. We go into the chain 1 space. We go into the side of that last spike of the previous star. There. We go into the same stitch it came out of, and we go into the next 2 stitches. 1 and 2. Pull up the last couple loops, yarn over, pull through, and chain 1. And there's our third one of the row already. Last one of this row, we're going to go into that chain 1, go into the side of the last loop of the previous stitch, go into the same stitch in the next 2 stitches. And this is why I said you want to make sure that every one of those chain 3s are a little bit loose. Because here at the end of the row, starting in the second row, you're going to make the last spike or the last loop, you're going to have to go into that chain 1 that you skipped at the top of the chain 3. Remember, you make your chain 3 and then you start working into the second chain, you skipped that first chain. Here, you're going to need to go into that chain. It's easiest, of course, to find 1 loop at a time. And it can be a tight fit. You have to push it down on the hook there, but if you made it nice and loose, it shouldn't be too difficult. So we pull up a loop from there. We've got our 6 loops on the hook. Yarn over, pull through, and chain 1. And that's the second row. And then from there, it's the same thing to make each row. You pull your hook out, reinsert it from the other direction, turn, chain 3, remember to keep it nice and loose, and make your next Marguerite. And as you keep working, this is what you'll get. And that's all there is to the star stitch, the Marguerite stitch, the 5-point star stitch, whatever you want to call it. It's a great stitch to make. Thanks for watching.